Hello everybody, this is the 2015 Nationals covering interpretation video, and the purpose of this video is just to give all the players and the referees a little bit of guidance on how we're going to be interpreting the covering rule this year. Now, as the rules state, there is no intentional or obvious blocking allowed of the pack. Okay, now we'll get into what obvious blocking might look like in a little bit. But intentional blocking, firstly, is anything where it's quite clear the person has made an active decision that they want to block the pack. So you're looking for things like this, where the arms are all awkward and all over the pack. Something that is, not a common way you would hold the laser, but very clearly an attempt to cover the pack. So a couple of very obvious and clear ones that we know from history that aren't allowed under the covering rule. Firstly, touching the clear plastics. So any kind of arm position where you see the arms over or hovering directly over or touching the clear plastics, it would be in breach of the covering rule. Another thing that's covered by the covering rules is the use of clothing or hair or anything that hangs over the pack. So what we're also looking out for are shirts that droop down over the pack. Okay. In that case, we might request that the player uses a lucky band just to lucky up their shirt. And the other thing is hair that's not tied up can come down onto the pack. If the hair touches the pack, touches the clear plastics, if a collar, for example, touches the clear plastics, or if the arm of the shirt of the arm comes down and covers the pack, that could be considered covering. Before the game starts, what a ref should be doing is looking for players who have their hair out, or have their collars out, or have a loose shirt, and maybe requesting that they get those tied up in order to make sure that they don't get penalised during the game for that being in play. The other one that we know from previous nationals is the tight arm positions. So anything where the arms are really tight like this, you can see from side on, it's impossible to see my chest like that. So what we're really looking for is for players to be playing within the rules to have an open arm position, which means that their elbows aren't locked up, their elbows aren't pointing to the ground like this. Their arms are out and they have an open handhold. Now, as part of the covering rule, we talk about incidental covering being okay. And what we mean by that is that in normal gameplay, if you are just firing your phaser and doing your normal gameplay, and somebody fires at you at an odd angle and just happens to hit your arm, then that is not considered a breach of the covering rule. It's considered incidental covering. What we're looking for is static arm positions. Okay? So a static arm position is where your arm is fixed over your pack like that. Okay? So if you were to fire at somebody over there and then come back again, even though your arm might have gone over your pack for a brief second, would consider that incidental. It's incidental to just playing the game. However, a static arm position is where you have a locked arm position or a fixed arm position over your pack, and that would be considered covering. Okay, so another thing that the rules deals with is the concept of transitioning. So what we mean by a transition is a movement of your arms going from one position, namely a low position, to a high position, or vice versa, from a high position to a low position. Now, within the transitioning part of the covering rule, what is allowed is to do a complete transition from low to high, or high to low. But what we have to keep an eye out for is players who are doing a transition from low only halfway up and then coming back down again, or vice versa, coming only halfway down and going back up again. And the reason for that is that if they're in a standoff situation with a player, they can gain an advantage by putting their arm in front of their pack just at the critical time and then bringing it back down again. So what we're keeping an eye out for is a complete transition from low to high or high to low. Another thing that the covering rules deals with is blocking shots on our pack using our head or face. Okay? Now the main way that this comes into play in a normal game is when players put their chin on their shoulder like this. And usually they will be standing inside a base area where they're up against a wall. And the entry to the base means that the player would only have a shot on their shoulder, for example, and then they use their face or head to cover that shot. Okay? That is, in the past, has been accepted, but now will be ruled as covering your pack. Okay? You can look around your shoulder, but you can't put your head or face on your shoulder in order to block the shot on that shoulder. So phaser holds, what are we allowed to do? Okay, so this year we have a new phaser. So we're establishing phaser holds on the Helios phaser for the first time. The committee has decided to go with do not touch the clear plastic on the top, okay? Now, there is one exception. People put their finger on the back where the screen section is, that is okay, but the clear plastic is considered everything forward of the screen, okay? So that means we're allowed to put our hand on the red gum at the front, we're allowed to hold it upside down if we want to, we can hold it the standard way. All of those handholds are going to be okay, but what we're probably looking out for the most is this one here where the finger goes up on the top section there, okay? There is actually a sensor just behind that finger, so that finger will have an impact on whether the phaser can be shot from certain angles. So we have to make sure that that finger's down, okay, or across the top like that, and everything's clear away from that clear plastic area. So when we're reffing, what are we looking for overall? Because the incidental covering is allowed, okay, what we're really looking for is a couple of scenarios where there are greater responsibilities on the players to keep their arms away from their packs. Now what are those scenarios? The first one is if a player is dodging, and the second one is if a player is transitioning, okay? If a player is dodging, there is a greater responsibility to keep their arms away from their pack. Now the correct way to dodge is to lock the arms in and to move the whole body out of the way, like this. The incorrect way to dodge is to loosen the arms and as you dodge, bring your arm across. Okay? If the arms come away from the body and go in front of the pack like that as they're dodging, that would be a penalty for covering. The other one we're looking out for is the transition. So if we're standing off with somebody and we do the half transition like that, that would be considered covering because the player tried to shoot that person at the key moment and their arm was in front of their pack, they'd be covering their pack in a very obvious manner. Okay, so in summary, what we're really looking for is the scenario and what the players are doing. So if we're in the open and we're in general play, it's pretty hard to get penalised for covering, okay? The only way to get penalised for covering would be to do something obvious, or to be touching your clear plastics, or to have a static or locked up arm position, okay? However, if we're dodging, if we're using a wall cover, or if we're transitioning, then there's a greater responsibility to keep the arms away from the pack. Any kind of movement that just blocks just the tiniest bit should be considered a penalty because players gain a significant advantage when they're doing these dodging manoeuvres by just moving their arms slightly in front of their pack. So that's the covering interpretations for 2015. If you do have any questions or queries about it, please forward them through to your player representative or somebody on the committee so that we can address them. We hope that that's given you and your team some clarity on what's going to be appropriate as far as arm positions and